Hey guys, this is Mr. Sheffield, and coming to you with a part two of the United States of America physical geography. Remember on Monday, yesterday, we talked about part one. We talked about some of the mountain ranges, we talked about the size of the United States, we also talked a little bit about physical maps. Today, we're going to continue with our talk on waterways. And so this slide was a review from yesterday. Just in the water systems, many lakes, rivers, and tributaries play a crucial role in many aspects of life. Mississippi River, remember we talked about yesterday, was the longest river in the United States. Flows about 2,350 miles from its source, and it reaches a width of 1.5 miles at the basin. Um, the thing with most of the rivers in the United States is they actually flow into the Gulf of Mexico. And we talked about that yesterday, and we're going to show you that there is a line where some of the rivers actually flow away from that into the Pacific Ocean. We'll get to that in a moment. Colorado River and Rio Grande are also two very important rivers that start off in the Rocky Mountains and then head into that Gulf of Mexico as well. And so the thing that actually determines which way the water flows in the United States is the Continental Divide, and it's the highest ridge in the Rockies. And depending on what side the water flows on, depends if the water is heading east, right? It'll head east and down into the Gulf of Mexico, or if the water is going to head west. Most of the water heads into the Gulf of Mexico, but depending on which side of the continental divide you are on determines which way the water flows. Again, yesterday we talked about how glacier basins filled with water, and that's where we get our Great Lakes. And the Great Lakes, fun little acronym. You guys have probably learned this before, but again, we're reviewing this in our world geography class. The five Great Lakes is HOMES. HOMES for Lake Huron, Lake Ontario, Lake Michigan, Erie, and Superior. And then one other lake that you do need to know for the United States is in Utah, the Great Salt Lake. It's the largest salt lake in America. And so you do need to know the Great Salt Lake and that it is the largest salt lake in America. Now we have another physical map here, and it really breaks down even more the different mountain ranges. What this map really shows you is just how elevated the western part of the United States is. It starts off with the Rocky Mountain and that continental divide there, and then you have several smaller mountain ranges to the west, the Pacific Ranges, Sierra Nevada, and we'll talk a little bit about more of that in the middle in a minute. But you'll see right there in the middle, in between the Rocky Mountains and the Sierra Nevada and the Pacific Range, you'll have that Great Basin. You'll have that area that's really hot. And we'll get into a little bit of the climate breakdown in the United States in just a moment. But the mountains play a key role in the climate and what the temperature is like and what the weather's like in that area. So again, mountains ranges affect that climate. Areas west of the mountains tend to be more rainy, and areas directly east of the mountain range tend to be drier. In the western Great Plains, there's a semi-arid climate. We'll get into the different climates. About to show you a climate map that breaks all of this down. Big thing you need to know about the United States is where some of the natural disasters tend to happen. Along the Gulf Coast and the South Atlantic coast, so kind of the East Coast, but the bottom of it, tend to get a lot of hurricanes. 2020 already, the United States has been hit with at least eight, I believe it's nine, possibly nine hurricanes have actually touched ground in these areas. And so it's been a pretty heavy year for hurricanes in the Gulf and South Atlantic. Tornadoes happen a lot in the Midwest. We showed that picture a couple of days ago about Tornado Alley, and that just happens kind of in that middle of the country area. And then earthquakes tend to occur along the west coast. And you can see with all those mountain ranges, you have the tectonic plates there that are still moving. And anytime there is movement in there, there's a potential for earthquakes. And so these are kind of the areas that tend to get the most natural disasters. So we break down the climate. Remember, guys, we're here in Texas, and in Texas, you have kind of a humid subtropic, and so it's warm, humid, and so the air has a lot of the air is just really thick. Once you start getting into the west and you start to get into that Colombian Plateau, that's where you get into that desert, that space in between the Pacific Range and the Rocky Mountains. You get a lot of that desert, and that's where some of the hottest temperatures are recorded. Um, Once you get into the west coast, down here in California, you've got a humid tropic, and so it's a little bit more temperate. It's a little bit even weather, just because you're on that coastline. Remember, guys, when you're close to the water, that really helps to keep the temperatures kind of at bay, so they're not all over the place. Once you head towards the middle of the country and or you're surrounded by nothing but dry land, you can get a lot of variances in the temperature. They can become more extreme. Extreme, not necessarily highs, but a lot of lows. So you have this is a climate breakdown for the United States. You can kind of see where you're at, maybe even potentially where you want to go in the United States, and see what the weather is going to be like in that area. In the United States, we do have a lot of resources, and we've got a great map. We have a great resource map there. We've already talked about the mountain ranges. On the West Coast, you have that Sierra Nevada. You have the Olympic Mountains in Washington, the Cascades in Washington and Oregon. We're going to get to a great little resource map. But in the United States has a lot of petroleum, natural gas, ethanol, hydroelectric power. There's actually a lot of metals, and then national parks. Now, I know what you're thinking. We've just listed a lot of big business items: petroleum, oil, natural gas, ethanol, metals. And then we talk about national parks as a resource. And I want you guys to think a little bit on why national parks would be considered a resource. It's going to be one of your writing prompts that you will do today. Just think about how important it is to preserve nature, and preserve those natural resources. Is not something that businesses can come in and take over. If it's a national park, that means it's land for everybody in the United States to enjoy. Not one person can go and own that land. And so I want you guys to think about why that's important for us in America. Um, we talked a little bit about the climate. The climate along the Atlantic coast is somewhat mild. And remember, just because you're close to water, the water takes in and releases heat, and so it kind of keeps the winters a little bit more mild, and keeps the summers a little bit cooler. Whereas the temperatures inland tend to be more extreme. You don't have that water around you, taking in extra heat and releasing it as needed. You're not able to do this activity. It was going to be a great one, my favorite activity of all time. You're going to drag the icon to the region that you live in, and basically, you live in Houston, right? If you're in this classroom, so you would have dragged the icon down here, and you would be in the southern region. You would be in the southern region. And then finally, we have our land use and resources. And so you have your map legends there at the bottom, major resources. It shows you where coal is mined, where copper is found, where people fish. The United States is known for gold. You have all the gold rushes, and so if you head into the west, you'll see some of those gold rushes in California and kind of the northern part of Nevada. Up here, also northern part of Nevada, you have silver. Um, you have oil and natural gas. That's in and all around Texas, and you'll see some of those oil rigs that are there in the Gulf of Mexico, some in Utah, some in kind of the northern states, the Dakotas. Um, and then you'll also see the next legend to it is how land is used. And so any of the yellow land is commercial farming. So you'll see all throughout the Midwest, the center of the country. And then also on the East Coast, there is a lot of commercial farming. And then it seems like right next to it is livestock raising, and that happens a lot in the West. You'll see that running through the western and the southern part of Texas. Forest, you got a lot of forest in the Northwest, and then where it's gray out there, where it's gray, that's limited farming, limited livestock, and limited forest. So it's an excellent map for those of you that are interested in any of these careers. If you want to go hunting for gold, right? If you want to, do anything with oil, natural gas, this is a resource map that kind of tells you where you can find those items in the United States. So, congratulations, you've now made it through part two of the physical geography of the United States. What you're going to do is you're going to head to the hub. You click on resources and click on the folder that says October 27th. Inside that folder, we have this PowerPoint. So if you want to go through this at your own pace, you can totally do that. Then you're going to open up the questions. You're going to have 5 questions to answer about this PowerPoint, and then you're going to have one writing prompt to do. The questions and the writing prompt, you will be getting a grade for that today, and you will also be getting your attendance by turning that work into the hub. We'll be checking that work, and if you did the work, you'll be counted present. If you do not do the work, you will be counted absent. Any questions, send Mr. Duty or myself a message on Teams. We are giving the SAT test today, and so it may be a little while to get it, but we'll receive it sometime in the afternoon. Thank you guys so much, and head to the hub and get your work done.